Good morning and good afternoon. Welcome to another episode of Before Coffee. It is Monday. Is it our first Monday in November? It must be because all the storm alarms just went off, and that only happens on the first Monday of a month. So, first Monday of November, let's find out what happened, if anything happened over the weekend, which I'm sure some stuff did. And if we're going to report on it, well, that's another question. Today on Before Coffee. Will Coleman's culture. Has Germany turned its back on welcoming approaching migrants?
Oh, and it might seem like a bumper year for nuts, because it is. Well, Acorns at least.
A world's first AI agreement, Elon Musk and backlash from the tech community. The UK's AI summit.
And as election in the South, election day nears, we look at voter suppression in Mississippi.
Culture re-review. How the Sex Pistols defined punk from their first gig.
Those stories and more, which is today, National Nacho Day. Monday, November 6th, 2023. I'm Before Coffee.
Okay, our first news story is coming out of Germany. Will Coleman's culture, or welcoming culture in English. This is from Giulia Carbonaro on Euronews. I'm like, wait, what is that name? I've never seen that name in my life. After two electoral defeats for his coalition, Germany's Chancellor Olaf Scholz is now taking a tougher stance on migration, trying to ramp up efforts to deport those illegally in the country. Amid widespread panic shared by European countries during the migrant crisis of 2015 and 2016, Germany represented a beacon of light and optimism under the leadership of their Chancellor Angela Merkel, who famously opened her country up to a huge number of migrants. Under Merkel's leadership and her welcome culture policy, the country took in more than 1.2 million refugees and asylum seekers between 2015 and 2016. But as levels of illegal migration in Europe are once again on the rise, Germany now finds itself in a very different position, forced to turn its back on its welcome culture, which it once prided itself on. We are limiting irregular migration from Germany. Too many people are coming, Chancellor Olaf Scholz said in a recent interview with newspaper Der Spiegel. We have to deport people more often and faster. Germany needs to ramp up the expulsion of migrants who are not allowed to stay in the country, Scholz said. Only days later, the German cabinet granted its approval to a legislative proposal aiming at streamlining the deportation process of unsuccessful asylum seekers. It's a huge chance for Germany and Scholz, who might have been expected to continue the legacy of his predecessor. There's a notable change in rhetoric and policy with the clear objective to bring migration numbers down, Michael Broning, a political scientist and member of the SPD Basic Value Commission, told Euronews. Suggested steps further include facilitating deportations, more severe sanctions for human traffickers, the reinstallation of temporary border controls, further bilateral agreements with the country of origin, and an extension of lists of countries' demands deemed safe. In sum, this is a drastic shift in policy and that signals an end to Germany's unique welcome culture as witnessed in 2015, he added. During the 3-day visit to Nigeria earlier this week, Scholz asked the African country president Bola Tinubu for help tackling soaring migration, suggesting a partnership somewhat similar to the Italy's Prime Minister Giorgio Meloni struck with Tunisia earlier this year. The idea is to expand the migration centers in Nigeria, where those deported from Germany could find shelter, healthcare, and job opportunities. The initiative is part of an incredibly tough approach Scholz and his government are showing towards illegal migration, after his three-party coalition performed badly in 2 regional elections earlier this month. I'm sorry. Is this really the trend we're going for here? That the majority of European people, or the majority of German people, I guess in this case, do not want migration, do not want immigrants in their community? Because I feel like that's just populism. I feel like there's a very small amount of people who feel that way, and they're forcing the government to make decisions because they think they're going to get more votes that way, and that's it. It's not thinking like anything they probably care about. They just want more votes in their government.
When you're reporting on polls, you have to get below the surface and read what actual questions they asked them.
Yeah.
Anyway, You have to go to the methodology. Is always key in these polls. You know, you don't
Do
know
you
who they
like that
ask.
there's migrants in your city? You know, something like that. Like they're not asking that, are they?
Maybe they just called people landlines too, right?
Yeah.
Who under 30 is the landline anymore?
No, we don't have one. We don't have a landline.
Right?
Yeah,
Right,
and we're
I have
over
a landline.
30, so both states were
60.
won by mainstream conservatives while the far right made significant gains in the last election. Broning said that it's impossible to say if this change would directly translate into greater support for the government in future elections. Then why are you doing it? Because you're assholes. But it's important to realize that German policy does want the government to act. He continued. Furthermore, it is important to see that the shift in policy does not happen in a vacuum, but rather against the backdrop of growing challenges from Germany's far right. So, in order to fight the far right, you join them. In recent months, the AfD had a surge in polls and scored significant electoral successes in Bavaria and Hesse. While many countries across Europe were tightening border controls in 2015, it was common to see cheering crowds of Germans greeting thousands of migrants arriving in the country after a long trek across the Middle East and Europe. What happened to the enthusiasm for Germany's newcomers? Despite what Scholz's shift in policy would suggest, many Germans are still in favor of welcoming people in need, and there is widespread support for accepting humanitarian responsibility, not denying it, Broning said. However, numbers have had an effect on the mood from 2015, has drastically changed, he added. Today, there's widespread conviction among the German public that numbers must come down, and reactions to the current escalation in the Middle East have come to play an important and unexpected part in the transformation of the debate, Broning said. Pro-Palestinian rallies, a wave of anti-Semitic incidents, and the celebration of the Hamas attack in some high-migration neighborhoods has been stark reminders that not is all well with regards to migration and integration. In many ways, this has opened a discourse for more nuanced discussion. I love that celebration of the Hamas attack. Like, some people are just, what does that mean? Did they put out banners saying, yeah, go Hamas? No, I don't think so. I don't think that's what happened. I think there's somewhere the immigrants are happy about something and they're like, see, they're dangerous. This is proof because they are celebrating. And it's like one dude out of a million, you know? One dude was like, yeah, see, look, all the immigrants are evil. I don't believe that for a second. Pro-Palestinian rallies are all about anti-genocide, not about wanting to murder Israel. Maybe some of them are, because radicalism. But that's not a reason to say, hey, you're not allowed to leave your shitty country because you might be a terrorist. What is it, 2001 again? Your story.
What did Germany do after World War II? They all emigrated to South America.
Venezuela, yeah.
There's no emigrating too, by the way. Germans have always been, even before there was mass immigration, Germans were like strategically immigrating all over the place. That's why you don't see like that huge German backlash in America. It's because it didn't come in one big dump. They came in strategic little vessels, you know. Of course, after World War I, it got anti-German. All right, so we're going to go on to the Year of the Nut. It seems like there are a lot of acorns, not just acorns, because I know we got walnuts here, and it's a bumper crop here. It's freaking ridiculous. If I wouldn't have gone out there and picked up 2 giant friggin' garbage cans full of walnuts, they'd be all over the street. And that's just from 2 trees. And we got 14 of them. And they're all over the freaking place. The squirrels here, they're bored with walnut street and apples. Those apples are easier to get. But yeah, the apples are wiped out. They're like, fuck the walnuts, there's too many of them. But they're eating them too. I mean, they're storing them away. They don't eat them. They just pack them away for the winter. Has your carbon, this is from the AP. Jesse Damiano. Has your car been getting pelted with acorns? Have you found yourself running through a hailstorm of walnuts with your hands protecting your head? Yes. This is a couple weeks ago. Chances are the trees in your region are experiencing mass year. Nut-bearing trees like black walnuts, beeches, and those acorn-producing oaks have on and off years. On years, called mast years, see vigorous production of nuts across the entire species throughout a region. During mast years, a single oak can drop thousands of acorns, forcing you to rake your lawn before any leaves drop and sweep your driveway to avoid twisting your ankle while navigating a blanket of marbles. After expanding all that energy on abundant crop, the trees take a break, producing few if any nuts in the off years. Yeah, I think last year was an off year for at least walnuts. Cycles for mature red oaks and black walnuts typically run 2 to 5 years. Pecans tend to alternate between boom and bust, often taking just 1 year off. Most fruit and nut trees undergo these cycles, although each species has its own timeline, and even then, their schedules are not set in stone. And a lot of times it depends on how many bees you have around. There is no general consensus as why these are massed years, according to Jonathan M. Lerner, Associate Professor and Chair of the Department of Urban Horticulture and Design of Farmingdale State College in New York. There's a lot of conjecture that it is caused by variations in temperature and natural rainfall, but we've never been able to hammer out exactly why some years have greater production than others. Massed years help to ensure propagation of tree species because at least some of those acorns and nuts, which contain seeds, take root and grow into saplings. The phenomenon also affects the wildlife population as bumper crops during massed years provide abundant food for woodpeckers, deer, mice, wild turkeys, squirrels, and other animals, resulting in more breeding. Less food during off years tends to keep those populations in check. The production of trees has far-reaching consequences on wildlife and organisms, and fewer rodents during off years affects larger animals higher in the food chain like foxes, owls, and bobcats. Although an abundance of acorns may be a nuisance, the ecological consequences of a massed year can extend for a year or 2 or 3 afterward. The reasons and stimuli for the cycle may be unknown, but one thing is clear: as plants go, we go, said Lehrer. So if you're finding yourself ducking for cover, take precautions. Avoid parking under masting trees to protect your car. Take care when walking so as not to slip or trip. And most importantly, remember to look up. That's the story from AP. And that's the world of nuts. It's a nutty story. I'm out of puns.
The world of nuts. I love it. Watch out for those acorns out there. You don't want to get hurt. In AI news. In AI news, we have finally finished the world's first AI summit in the UK. I say we, but a bunch of people in power have. This is from Pascal Davies on Euronews Next. Representatives and companies from 28 countries, including the US and China, as well as the EU, signed a pact that aims to tackle the risk of so-called frontier AI models. International governments signed a world-first agreement on artificial intelligence at a global summit in the United Kingdom to combat the catastrophic risks that technology could present. Tech experts, global leaders, and representatives from across 27 countries and the European Union are attending the UK's AI Safety Summit, which runs from Wednesday until Thursday at the Bletchley Park, once home to the Second World War codebreakers. The UK announced it would invest in an AI supercomputer, while the Tesla and while the Tesla and Twitter boss, fuxing X, I am against this, Elon Musk said on the sideline of the event that AI is one of the biggest threats to humanity. However, many in the tech community signed an open letter calling for a spectrum of approaches from open source to open science for scientists, tech leaders, and governments to work together. Here are key takeaways from the event. Xbox. Yeah, I know. I can't believe I said that. He's owner of Xbox.
Right.
The Bletchley Declaration of AI Safety is a statement signed by representatives and companies of 28 countries, including the US, China, and the EU. It aims to tackle the risk of so-called frontier AI models, the large language models developed by companies such as OpenAI. The UK government called it a world-first agreement between the signatories, which aims to identify the AI safety risk of shared concern and build respective risk-based policies across countries. It warns frontier AI, which is the most sophisticated form of technology that is being used in generative models such as ChatGPT, has the potential for serious and even catastrophic harm, either deliberate or unintentional, stemming from the most significant capabilities of these AI models. The UK's Secretary of State for Science, Innovation and Technology, Michelle Donnellan, said the agreement was a landmark achievement and that it lays the foundation for today's discussions. However, experts argue the agreement does not go far enough. As usual, the government never goes far enough until it's something evil and they go too far. That's my own cynicalness there. Bringing major powers together to endorse ethical principles can be viewed as a success, but the undertaking of producing concrete policies and accountability mechanisms must follow swiftly. Paul Tether, CEO of AI-enabled research for Amplify, told Euronews Next. Vague terminology leaves room for misinterpretations while relying solely on voluntary cooperation is insufficient towards sparking globally recognized best practices around AI. The UK government also announced that there would be future AI safety summits. South Korea will launch another mini virtual summit on AI in the next 6 months, and France will host the next in-person AI summit next year. Who said what? Elon Musk arrived at the summit and kept quiet during the talks but warned about the risk of AI. We're not stronger or faster than other creatures, but we are more intelligent. And here we are, for the first time really in human history, with something that's going to be far more intelligent than us. I don't think it's very intelligent. I think it has intelligence, but I don't think it's very smart at all. It doesn't know with that it's telling lies. It gets tricked easily by false news and just random facts on the internet, because all it's doing is just specifically ChatGPT, right? The whole thing that happened with you were asking about a basketball player that had been traded, and then it denied that the basketball player was traded. It had no relevant information for you, and it kept on telling you were wrong, which you weren't, because you literally gave it an article saying, look, this guy was traded. And then it just came, I'm sorry, I'm not perfect. See, it's just like a human, you know? Oh, I guess I was wrong. Musk, who co-founded ChatGPT, developed OpenAI, and has launched a new venture called XAI because he's obsessed with the letter X, said there should be a referee for tech companies, but the regulation should be implemented with caution. I think that we're aiming for here is, first, to establish that there should be a referee function. I think there should. And you should know to be cautious in how regulations are applied, so you don't go charging in with regulations that inhibit the positive side of AI. Musk will speak with British Prime Minister Rishi Sunak later on Thursday on his platform Twitter. European Commission Chief Ursula von der Leyen warned AI came with risk and opportunities and praised how quantum physics led to nuclear energy, but also societal risks such as the atomic bomb. Oh yeah, that's a good point. We are entering a completely different era. We are now at the dawn of an era which machines can act intelligently. My wish for the next 5 years is that we learn from the past and act fast, she says. Von der Leyen urged a system of objective scientific checks and balances with the independent scientific community and for AI safety standards that are accepted worldwide. She said that the EU's AI Act is the final stage of the legislative process. She also said the potential of a European AI office is being discussed, which could lead to deal with more advanced AI models with responsibility for oversight and would cooperate with similar entities around the world. Kamala Harris, U.S. Vice President, said that the action was needed to address the full spectrum of AI risks and not just existential fears about threats of cyber attacks and the development of bioweapons. There are already threats and also demand our action. Threats that are currently causing harm and many people also feel existential, she said at the U.S. Embassy in London. Charles III, Britain's king, in a video speech in which he compared the development of AI to the significance of splitting the atom and harnessing fire. He said AI was one of the greatest technological leaps in history of human endeavor, and said it could help hasten our journey towards net zero and realize a new era of potential, limitless, clean, green energy. But he warned, we must work together on combating its significant risks too. Okay. Backlash from the community has been, I guess there's backlash? Moral panic. Oh, okay, I see. New technologies also always lead to hype. Nick Clegg from the president of Meta has said. They often lead to excessive zeal among the advocates and excessive pessimism among the critics. Yeah, I guess me. I remember the 80s. There was this moral panic about video games. There were moral panics about the radio, the bicycle, the internet. I don't think anyone's having a moral panic. They just think that AI is replacing people's actual jobs. Like, and stealing content and reusing it. Like, oh, it's not copyrighted anymore.
Fake
People are
stories.
losing money because AI models are basically reusing their assets. Mark Sherman, President and Executive Director of Mozilla Foundation, linked to the browser Firefox, also raised concerns that the summit was a world stage platform for private companies to push their interests. We have seen time and time again that increasing public access and scrutiny makes technology safer, not more dangerous. The idea that tight and proprietary control of foundational AI models is not only a path to protecting us from society-scale harm is naive at best, dangerous at worst, Sherman said in his comments to Euronews Next. The UK's ambition from Sunak is unclear. How they're going to regulate, and other countries are already setting up their own regulations. There is a stiff competition from the US and China and the EU. President Joe Biden said America will lead the way during this period of technological change after signing an AI executive order on October 30th. Meanwhile, the EU is also trying to set up its own AI guidelines. However, unlike the EU, the UK said it does not plan to adopt new legislation to regulate AI, but would instead require the existing regulators in the UK to be responsible for AI in their sectors. China too has been pushing through its own rules governing generative AI. The country's Vice Minister of Technology, Wu Zhaohu, said that the summit in China would be contributing to an international mechanism on AI, broadening participation and governance framework based on wide consensus, delivering benefits to the people and building a community with shared future for mankind. Despite the competition, Will Cavendish from the Google DeepMind and UK government advisor and now global digital lead at the firm Arup, argues that the UK can have a place in the world's AI stage. The UK already has the third largest AI sector in the world, so it's reasonable for the UK to aspire to be one of the global leaders in this exciting area, he told Euronews Next. But he also said countries need to come together to carve out a future for all. There's the end of my article about how everyone's not seeing too far in the future, but also seeing in the future, and I can see in 50 years somebody reporting, back in 2023 they didn't do enough or something, and we're all going to be like, oh, what a shame that 2020 hindsight strikes again. Your story.
Okay. Well, that's why our show, whatever intelligence we do show, is human generated. Intelligence. It may be given out with an eyedropper, but it's human. And AP story on the Mississippi voting, we expose the light on the history of Mississippi and keeping the black people down. This is from AP.
Don't say that too happily.
What?
Just making a joke.
I say it happily as in a sarcastic way. This news deals in sarcasm, this news show. We say things in kind of a hinky little way. It's because we don't really believe it, okay? It's called sarcasm. So Mississippi, this is from Associated Press, Ayanna Alexander. They're having an election tomorrow for governor and other offices in Mississippi. A few years ago, Tiffany Wilburn didn't see a point in voting any longer. Her children didn't have proper school books, health insurance was expensive and hard to get. Police abuse continued against black residents, and her city's struggle to get clean drinking water seemed emblematic of her community, always coming out on the short end of the state decision making. Combine that with Mississippi's long history of voter suppression, and she felt casting a ballot was simply a hopeless exercise. It's not like you're being heard, Wilburn said in her hometown of Jackson, the state capital. You run through the polls hoping and praying for change, and you look around and nothing's really happened, so you shut down. Recent interviews of black voters, voting rights groups, candidates, and researchers show that the voter fatigue felt by Wilburn has been widely shared in a state where nearly 40% of the overall population is black. This year, the political dynamics have combined to begin changing that, leading many voters, such as Wilburn, to re-engage. The race for governor appears competitive and is drawing national attention. Tuesday's election also happens to be the first one in Mississippi to be held without the burden of an unusual post-Reconstruction constitutional provision that had made it virtually impossible for black candidates to win on a statewide basis. 5 black candidates are running for statewide office, from agriculture commissioner to secretary of state. Each is trying to become the first black candidate to ever win one of those posts. Voting rights advocates hope the changes will encourage the rebuilding of black communities' voting base and provide a tailwind to Democrats in the state that is now mostly controlled by Republicans. Black people here aren't scared to vote and do care because it impacts all of us, our entire livelihood, said Leonard Warren, a 66-year-old voter in Vicksburg. Now it's more important that we enhance education and educate all voters, especially black people, but the voting process isn't necessarily sound, and there are many constraints that we are facing, like gerrymandering, purging of voter rolls. It's a lot. But I'm going and taking everyone I can with me. White leaders of both parties used numerous tactics over several decades to suppress the black vote, from poll taxes to literacy tests. Among the most pernicious was a provision slipped into the Mississippi Constitution in 1890 that required the candidates for governor and other statewide offices to win not only a majority of the vote, but also a majority of the 122 House districts. Little sneaky, little clever little way to keep their power. After a lawsuit, voters in 2020 repealed it, ensuring that candidates just had to win a simple statewide majority. Some voting rights groups and candidates said that it provides an opening, but not just for the state's candidates, but also to start expanding their voter base. What happens? What's a voter base? It's people that vote every year, right? Not just the people that go, well, it's a presidential election, I suppose I'll drag my ass out. Nope. Voter base are the people that are reliable voters. We've got to sow these seeds in areas that never had anything grown. We met people who felt like, why vote? Because nothing's going to happen. It's the mindset and those feelings that we have to address. That's the intended consequence of voter suppression, to make you feel like voting don't matter. Black voters in the state still face a disproportionate burden. A common complaint is about the purging of voter rolls that has caused problems for black voters as recently as this year's August primary. Now, the little trick they do is they only put one voting precinct in your whole entire district. Everybody's got to get in line. And there are people like, and of course they shorten early voting hours.
Yeah, we've got a comment here from chat saying, yeah, all the voter bases are old people.
You have to vote in more than one election to be considered a voter base.
Yeah, that's what they're saying. They're saying, and the only people who do that are old people. Young people don't vote every time. They only vote. Right. Yeah.
And the elections that are going to affect them more, right? This election is not going to affect me as much as it's going to affect somebody in their 20s.
Yeah.
Even though they're just going to blow it off. I've been voting with Tugalo for several years with no problems. When I went, I was told, you're not in the system, she said. You're purging people who are actually voting now. If people don't know they are purged until election day, it's too late then. It's Mississippi, folks. Critics say among the remaining hurdles is another part of the state constitution that strips voting rights on people who have committed certain felonies, a provision that also dates to 1890. Of course, you make people can't vote. You make it so people with felonies can't vote, and then you start making other things felonies. Like trying to vote illegally is a felony. You put them in, little catch-22 there. Critics say the named crimes through the lens of white people's structure thought black people were more likely to commit. In 2009, a former Democratic state attorney general issued an opinion that expanded the list to 22 crimes, including timber larceny, carjacking, felony shoplifting, and passing bad checks. Congress was infamous for passing bad checks back in the 90s. Anyway, we have to have conversation of what's still on the books because the repeal is done, but the work isn't over, says Danielle Holmes, a national social injustice organizer for Repairs of the Breach, a group that advocates for voting rights, democracy, and a rage of socialists. That's how we get to the root of the fatigue. The U.S. Supreme Court declined to reconsider a 22 decision by the conservative 5th U.S. Circuit Court of Appeals that said Mississippi had remedied the discriminatory intent of the original provisions by altering the list of disenfranchised crimes. No nonsense. But many other states in recent years have taken steps to reinstate voting rights for former felons. In Mississippi, more than 10% of black adults are formerly incarcerated, according to the 2022 report about the Sentencing Project. That's a huge percentage. If the elections were close and that 10% could vote, it's very well they could sway the election, said Marvin King, professor at the University of Mississippi, who focuses on African American politics. More recent events have contributed to a sense of embattlement in the black community. In particular, the 2022 water crisis in Jackson left more than 150,000 residents in a majority black city without running water in several days, where heavy rains damaged one of the water treatment plants. Residents lamented the government's lack of attention to their basic needs. We just want to point out that Jackson is the actual capital city of Mississippi, where the governor lives, and all the government guys, and they didn't have drinking water. Last spring, Republican government Tate Reeves, who faces re-election challenge from Democrat Brandon Presley, signed into law a major change passed by Republican-controlled legislature and majority white legislature that created special courts with appointed judges in the county that includes Jackson. 2 lawsuits challenged it, arguing that the Mississippi Constitution requires most judges to be elected. Critics said that another way to make it harder for black voters to elect candidates of their choice in the Mississippi Supreme Court blocked the appointment of the circuit court judges, but allowed new lower court one with an appointed judge. Ty Pickens, the Democratic nominee for Secretary of State, took notice, citing his extensive history in suing the state for similar offenses in the past. We are here to make sure that that doesn't continue to happen, he said during candidates' rally in Vicksburg. Black voters are listening, but some said boosting engagement is a two-way street. If they show up to vote, it has to be translated into action. That sentiment is especially strong for college campuses, a focal point of several of the black candidates running for statewide offices. Students in Jackson State University, historically black college, want to see candidates spend time on campus discussing the priorities of the youngest voting generation. If I were to put myself in a candidate's shoes, I would actually go on campus, not to get votes, but to understand, said Austin Crudup, 23-year-old student. Ask what is something that you would like me to fix or change? What could I do to make your life a little bit easier? This story is written with the help from Associated Press writers Emily Wagster Pettis in Jackson, Mississippi, and Gary Fields in Washington. That's it.
So much help to tell us stuff we already know. Kind of. It's still happening, guys.
Ready?
No one cares. We are reaching, in a way, overabundance of depression, where people are just like, "What's the point anymore?" You know.
We're the remedy to depression.
Yes, we must remedy it. Fight strong. Don't give up. Speaking of sticking it to the man and telling him they suck, the Sex Pistols. Let's review how they defined punk from their first gig. This is from Johnny Walfist on Euronews Culture. 6 November 1975. The Sex Pistols played their first gig. On this day, nearly half a century ago, in London's St. Martin's School of Art Common Room, a scraggly group of teenagers came together for the first gig of one of punk's most iconic bands. The band was, of course, the Sex Pistols. From their live debut in 1975 to the band's dissolution in January 1978, the Sex Pistols made a short-lived but undeniable imprint on cultural zeitgeist. Today, their look is still on the core of any punk aesthetic. Was the entire project an industry plant? Had the punk aesthetic been entirely curated? What really happened between bassist Sid Vicious and his girlfriend Nancy Spugan? All of these questions are still on the forefront of any punk fan's minds when the band's name is mentioned. Yet, at the gig in a North London art school, the germination of the group's shape-shifting mythos hadn't been fully formed. Vicious, arguably the band's most notable member, wouldn't even join until 1977. At the time of the gig, it was still Glenn Matlock on the bass. He had joined the band at the direction of Malcolm McLaren and the Sex Pistols manager. To understand the story of the Sex Pistols, it's key to appreciate the role McLaren had in forming the band. McLaren worked alongside Vivienne Westwood at a clothes shop in Chelsea. By 1974, the shop was named Sex and was known as a hangout for people interested in the nascent punk rock scene. Helped by Bernard Rhodes, who later introduced the members of The Clash to each other, McLaren found a new lead singer for the band, a role which founding member Steve Jones wasn't comfortable with. The pair came across John Linden. Linden was an intermediate fit for the manager, who was looking for someone to encompass the anarchic spirit and look at the punk rock societal apathy. Rechristened as Johnny Rotten, Linden joined
His name is Lydon.
Lydon. Oh, okay. Sorry, that's not how I would say that. Lydon joined Jones, Matlock, and Paul Cook on the drums. Before Rotten was found as the lead singer, McLaren played with ideas of importing New York Dolls frontman Sylvan for the project. Despite the somewhat artificial way the band was formed, the Sex Pistols were nonetheless created out of a genuine ambition to create something aggressively counterculture to the popular music of the day. When the Sex Pistols hit the stage for the first time, it was in support of rock and roll band Bazooka Joe, whose bassist went on to become glam rocker Adam Ant. The Punks played a set mostly made up of covers from the bands like the Monkees and the Who, as well as their own single, 17. The next year, Ramones would release their debut album, and The Clash would form. Before all that, in a small college room, one of the bands at the genesis of rock's most visually distinctive movements made their tentative first steps. There's a very short look at how the Sex Pistols became the Sex Pistols, and how I didn't know they only lasted for like 3 years.
Made one.
But that's punk for you.
Yep, and they made one album, and they're like you said, they're one of their maybe their most famous player, Sid Vicious, didn't even play in their one album because he was terrible. He was a terrible bass player. They're like, let's use somebody else. He never learned to play bass. Then he was on trial. He's gonna go on trial for murder when he OD'd. So for murdering his girlfriend. You gotta watch the movie Sid and Nancy. It's a really good movie. Starring Gary Oldman as Sid Vicious.
Yeah, the whole thing is they definitely defined punk with that story.
Again, the Sex Pistols, I do like that. I do like the Sex Pistols. To me, that was just in your face. Proper England can go fuck themselves stuff. Yeah.
Your story.
Anyway, my story. This day in history. In this day in 1661, Charles II, who ruled Spain from 1665 to 1700, who was the last monarch from the Spanish Habsburg dynasty, was born. And boy, that is one ugly picture. I mean, dude, must be all that inbreeding.
The
it looks
Habsburg
like his face
chin,
got pushed in. Oh Lord, no, he's just got a giant head and it's all pushed in. It's like, oh my God, who commissioned that portrait? Hopefully, it's just a bad painting, right? Okay, 1854, American bandmaster John Philip Sousa, who composed 136 military marches, was born. In 1887, professional basketball player Walter Johnson thrashed the greatest fastball in the history of the game, but we'll never know because this is 1887 when he was born, in Humboldt, Kansas, before we had radar guns to measure speed. 1888, Benjamin Harrison of the Republican Party was elected to the U.S. presidency by electoral majority despite losing the popular vote by more than 90,000 to his Democratic opponent, Grover Cleveland. The United States has a stupid system for electing presidents. 1917, the second phase of the Russian Revolution in 1917 began as the Bolsheviks seized power in Russia. So it's not May Day, but this day in 1917 when the Bolsheviks took over. 1995, another election, Ronald Reagan won. 1995, Art Modell, the owner of the NFL's Cleveland Browns, announced that he was moving the team to Baltimore, which enraged sports writers and Cleveland fans. 2012, American politician Tammy Baldwin, a Democrat from Wisconsin, became the first openly gay person to be elected to the U.S. Senate. From Wisconsin even, from the Cheesehead State. We don't care, just do your job. 1860, American Abraham Lincoln was elected President of the United States, another election year, and on this day in 1860, Americans elected as their president Abraham Lincoln, whose victory led to the secession of southern states and a long and bloody civil war. Birthdays today, James Naismith. Who's James Naismith? Canadian, American athlete and educator who is credited for inventing basketball. And he was born in November 6th, 1861, died November 28th, 1839 at the age of 78 in Lawrence, Kansas. So a Canadian invented basketball. Take that. Other birthdays today. Mike Nichols, American director and comedian. Sally Field, we were just talking about Catch-22. That was a Mike Nichols production. Sally Field, 1946, birthday. Maria Shriver, one of the Kennedy clan, born in 1955. And Ethan Hawke, American actor and director, born on this day in 1970. And then besides the National Nacho Day, not Taco Day. That has to be a Tuesday. National Nacho Day. It's also Job Action Day. Job Action Day. So for some reason, they think people want action on job on Monday morning. They would be incorrect. International Day for Preventing the Exploitation of the Environment and War in our... Oh my God, this thing is long. Hold on a second, this is a paragraph. It's International Day Preventing of Exploitation of the Environment in War and Armed Conflict. All right. We're not doing much of a job preventing that these days because we got war and armed conflicts going on everywhere. At least 3 continents. Color the World Orange Day today, which the fall colors are doing that. It's National Nachos Day, National Saxophone Day, and that's it. That's all of them. National Day for Preventing the Exploitation and Environmental War.
That's a long one.
A little bit long. Turn that into an acronym. PTEOTEIW. This goes on too long. That's it, man.
All right. This has been Allison here from the Netherlands. I'm going to go out and search for some terrible nachos because they make nachos really bad here. You know, for a place with so many different cheeses, there's nachos just not creative whatsoever, you know? Just the shittiest cheese ever. Even America has better cheese for their nachos. We'll see you tomorrow on Tuesday for Good News Tuesday. Where we're gonna talk about the great stuff that's happening, not all the bad stuff that's happening. And we'll see you then.
Well, Europeans have not used it as stuff in nachos. It's not actually cheese. It stopped being cheese a long time into that processing thing where it doesn't get all stringy when you melt it. It's not cheese. So that's the secret. Got to use that processed
Velveeta, man.
Velveeta or American cheese or just some cheese soup. Anyway, this is Roger of the United States where we have no artificial intelligence of any kind, and we barely have any intelligence. On November 6th, 2023 edition of Before Coffee.
Be sure to hit the like, subscribe, and notify buttons, and follow our other channels, Toxic Alley, History of Gravy, and Scratchy Old Records.